2 a.m. and we'll do our roll call.
Supervisor McGordy
I'm here.
and Supervisor Hashak.
And I'm here.
Okay, so next we'll have a discussion and possible action, including acceptance of an update from the Drought Task Force Committee countywide. And we have approximately 90 minutes for the entire meeting today. So why don't we start with Department Head Howard Dashiell. Good morning, Howard.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Supervisor Hashak. Howard Dashiell, your Director of Transportation, I guess ex officio Water Agency Manager, although I think technically Darcy still is as the CEO. So, and Darcy Antle's in the room. So, you know, the Drought Task Force has been meeting for over a year, and we've just, at the direction of the board, changed our format to this standing committee. And all the people on the email lists that would normally attend, and I can't see what's on Zoom yet. I don't know if we've got other people there, but I did send out an email to that group and asked them if they had anything they'd like to discuss. And I basically didn't get any news on that. So I will just report that unless someone during public expression comes in, that it would appear that the drought hotline, the drought email is relatively quiet. I'm not getting the calls and emails I was getting, say, a year ago. That could be because people kind of know the drill. The drought is, you know, roughly the same, I would say. We are prepared with the grant funds to resume hauling water to Fort Bragg if they call on us to do that. Every year, you know, the board has approved those contracts. They're in place. So we just will await that. And I guess for right now, no news is good news. So that's my report.
Well, thank you, Howard. John, any questions for Howard?
Yeah, so with the funds that the grant that the state awarded Mendocino County to do the hauling of the water to the coast last year, and then we didn't use up even half of it last year. And if we aren't looking at using some of the funds, you know, Supervisor Jurdy and I met with staff from Assemblymember Wood and Senator McGuire's offices to see if we could repurpose some of those funds, you know, or use it in another way for other kinds of emergencies. So do you have any opinion, and do you have an update about what the funding availability might be at this point?
Well, those estimates were done by Sarah Pierce, and I mean, if you just look at the contract commitments, we've got like $800,000 or $900,000 for sure that's available. But if we don't start hauling water and we don't meet some of those contract commitments, it could be $1 million. Those are the estimates. I looked at the grant eligible activities and didn't see a lot of flexibility there. But if you're talking to the state at those higher levels, maybe there are flexibilities for the grant money, but it would appear the water hauling and things related to that were eligible. Some of the other things, like I know the community would really like to do groundwater monitoring in many of our basins and trying to get a handle on you know, what the capacity of some of our aquifers are. I didn't see those kinds of activities, which have been popular in the past, as eligible under that particular grant. But anything's possible at the state level, so I'm glad you've got the top people trying to inquire. So that would be great.
Yeah, so I guess we just need to figure out, if we don't use that money, if we can repurpose it, what would be what's out there that needs to be funded for emergency drinking water, I guess. And I'd just like to report too that Round Valley got about a $500,000 grant to do groundwater studies up there. in Round Valley.
I think that's fantastic. We really need to get a handle on our aquifers throughout the county so that, we can make good decisions when, we have another ordinance tracking on commercial wells that sell water. We want to be sure that before we commit to pumping water anywhere, that we have water to pump. And while historically Mendocino County's been blessed, with ample water from rainfall, we're obviously, as we go into possibly a fourth year of drought, the way that ocean temperatures are looking at the equator, we're still in a La Nina situation, so we want to be prepared. Anything else, John?
Well, I've just been following, like a lot of people have been following what the governor's been saying about the increased aridity and, kind of solutions that the state is trying to come up with for greater funding options and, what we're going to do about this. That looks like a long-term problem for the state of California.
And that kind of leads into why we're here today and why we've moved this whole discussion of drought into the Public Health, Safety, and Resource Committee is because we were advised by Councilor Curtis that we really were starting to exceed the kind of the practical time limits of an ad hoc, and that we had to probably have a more formal arrangement with ongoing, which is more structured. And while I'll miss the ad hoc for its flexibility, at least you can see that the county's making a real commitment and taking this very serious, that we're putting staff time and structure into having a drought response and also a long-term water response, because it's something that we're going to need. We now, through 3 years of drought, have missed the equivalent of a rainy season. If you add up the deficit of what we've had over 3 years, it equals a whole rainy season. So that shows you that climate change for us is very real, and we need to be able to address it. I do have a question for CEO Antle about how we originally funded the water hauling and whether we've returned funds to the PG&E money that we had put aside. We had tried to make kind of a, what's the right term for it? So something that was temporary, kind of like a bridge funding that we hope to repay. So where do we stand on that?
CEO Antle, yes, we funded $1.5 million out of the PG&E settlement at the beginning of the drought process. $500,000 of that was paid back to the PG&E fund, I believe either at first quarter or mid-year.
Okay, that's good, because I see that as kind of a contingency fund for disasters. And it's hard for us to believe, but we may also have floods one of these days too, so having something on hand to be able to address emergency road repair and everything else, I think would be very wise for us to continue with that into the future. So I think we've covered board comments. Anything else, John, that you want to add?
Yeah, just to clarify about the standing committee aspect of this drought task force, is that my understanding is it fulfills the obligations for the AB 552, or is it SB 552?
If I may respond to the chair, I believe it is SB 552. Having the task force is one of the obligations under the statute. There are things that you need to be, I think, continuing to look at and continuing to hear from the community on as part of that. I believe the board previously adopted a recommendation with respect to a program to comply with 552, but the way I read the statute, that is ongoing. So I think you're going to have to continue to look at those factors over time.
And I think that a lot of those things that they say in that statute are things that we've been working on for the last year and a half practically. So I think we're in good standing with the state.
Good. So my hope for this committee too is that we kind of firm up our connection with professionals in the water community who are providing services and water. So we have about 42 different organizations. So moving forward, I want to be sure that we keep them really well informed. And we're about to have a discussion on how Mendocino might shape its water policy into the future. So we'll get a chance to dive into that. Are there any public comments? So if there are, so let me read the script to be sure that we understand. So, oh, there we are. Okay, so public expression. So we invite members of the public to provide comment on items of interest, and members of the public in the chambers shall line up at the podium, but there are no members of the public, so we don't have to worry about that right now. Members of the public joining via Zoom shall utilize the raised hand feature by clicking the raised hand button on the bottom of their screen or by pressing *9 if they're calling in the Zoom meeting via telephone. Are there any comments at this time, Atlas? No.
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. So next we'll move on to agenda item 2B is discussion and possible action regarding draft Mendocino County Agency Water Implementation Plan. There's attachment A for scenario number 1 of Mendocino County Water Resource Team and attachment B for scenario number 1 Water Resource Specialist RFP. Update from Mendocino County Water Agency funding ad hoc committee regarding reestablishment of a standalone Mendocino County Water Agency and direction to staff as appropriate. So just some real quick background. We've had discussion on the board level about this. And what we're trying to do is how do we figure out how to put together a meaningful agency with limited amounts of money, because that's where we stand right now financially. We're not flush. So we're racking our brains, and we have the benefit of a very complete study done by GEI consultants, and let's see, John, if you want to say anything, and then we'll turn it over to Howard to discuss it with us.
Well, again, I'd just like to say that I think we have two issues here. We have the short-term, immediate, funding possibilities and how to move forward with that. It seems like, in the short term, we kind of need to get the information together from different water districts and agencies of, what kind of information they have, what they've turned into the state, and then what their needs are as far as their operations, and then also the capital improvement plans that they have. And so if we're looking at funding from the state that might be available in the very near future, it seems like we should be working on getting that kind of information together, which, I've heard from different water districts that it's not hard to get together, that they have it pretty much together, that the county has already done some work on it, and it might just need to be updated. And so if we can get that together and be ready for the immediate needs of funding, that might be available, then that's probably a good approach. And then the other is the long term. How do we really set up this water agency that fits the needs or meets the needs of different water agencies and what we're trying to do as a county?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's a couple of different approaches. The first thing I would say is that based on the GEI consulting report was that nobody wants Mendocino County to manage water resources as an agency. What they want is assistance and technical advice. So for grant writing and for execution of grants possibly, or at least some assistance, as well as technical advice. So the smaller water companies have problems getting information. It's expensive for them to use consultants, so we have an option there. The other thing I would just say to it, too, the other thing that I know is very, very important is sort of the political role that Mendocino County plays when we take leadership on something, because we have access to the political system that individual water companies may not as easily. So there's a leadership aspect of this, too, for the Board of Supervisors to play a role in prioritizing what resources are important and what investment is important and how we're going to go about doing it. So with that kind of as background, Howard, go ahead and share with us what you're thinking and what we've discussed before in the board meeting.
Sure. Again, Howard DeShiel, Director of Transportation. Obviously, the board gave direction to move forward with scenario 1, which was fairly well defined at the September 2nd meeting. The board added to that a desire to see a contract come back to them that would specify tasks and deliverables, and they were seemed to indicate they'd like a deliverable at least in all of the 5 districts. That's my recollection of the board meeting. And so I think that the next step under scenario 1 would be to RFP for consultant to implement scenario 1. Also in scenario 1 was the idea of locating the water agency function at the UC cooperative extension and starting a process of, handing off the workload that's presently at DOT, so that next year, because we have this one time, the board has authorized one time $250,000 for that. The idea is that the water agency function would be housed at the UC cooperative and possibly completely funded by our existing $190,000 or $191,000 a year. That's my recollection of the September 2nd board direction.
Yeah, that kind of jives with what I had to say. CEO Antle?
Just for clarification, it was August 2nd.
August 2nd.
August 2nd, yeah.
I'm off a month.
Okay.
I would say the other thing I'd add in report, speaking of the GEI work, when the board on May 17th didn't seem to proceed or want to proceed with this new standalone agency, and in fact, we've opted for a water resource team. I think I call it WIRT. I kind of forget your acronym, Supervisor McGordy, but we're going to do this not standalone, but as a team. They decided, and I asked them to just hold off on that contract. They have not expended resources. I have not had them engaged while we worked on these things. I would say that one of the things in their scope that they wouldn't need to do anymore under scenario 1 is help with a recruitment of a general manager for the water agency. I think the board was clear that's off the table, at least for this year. There were some other tasks that went around that about policies and procedures for a new standalone water agency that would seem to be off the table as well if you're not going to actually create one. So I would expect, because it's a not to exceed contract, that there will be money left there. I do want to have them finish the technical specifications for a hydrologist, hydrogeologist, and general manager, just so the county has those updated and in our possession. That was one of their scope tasks, so that if next year we decide, based on what I heard the board say August 2nd, if we decide to go into a long-term thing, we would have those class specifications ready to go. But other than that, it's been discussed at another meeting as we've talked about these wells that might need, these commercial wells and over 2 acre-foot wells. We might need a hydrogeologist to review the technical submittals that are made. I would say that money that's left over in the GEI contract, because they do have hydrogeologists on staff at GEI, they have technical people there, that we could look at an amendment, which would have to come back to the Board of Supervisors to repurpose some of that. So that's my thinking on where we're at with the GEI contract. I've got them held off until I specifically know what tasks make sense for them to spend money. And if nothing else, if the money just came back to the county, that would be great too. It could just go back into the PG&E fund. So that's where I'm at with that, if that sounds good to you all.
Sounds good to me. Supervisor Hashtag?
Well, just talking about that contract, it was for, what, $306,000?
Right.
So how much of that have we spent so far?
I wish I had the exact amount, but I know that last time I looked at it, we said we'd easily have 40,000 if we repurpose that for hydrogeology technical review. And I think there might be twice that really left if we don't finish all the tasks, like maybe 80,000. I think that's close.
And so if we have that 80,000 and, we do have some tasks left for them, like you were outlining, but if we had like a need for a hydrologist, could we not use GEI and use a local firm that has a hydrologist, or
Sure.
is that a possibility?
You could I only said that it would be easier to do an amendment, which would have to come to the board because it's an existing contract. Otherwise, I'd have to RFP for that. I will say that I searched the professional geologist state website for registered professional hydrogeologists, and there are exactly 0 in Mendocino County. The closest hydrogeologist as a license is in Sonoma County and some in Sacramento. So I don't know of anybody locally that fits that role for a groundwater hydrogeologist in this county myself. Maybe you do, but I don't. So I think any way and I might add, when we have RFP'd in the past for specialists in this area of groundwater and even the new water agency, all the proposals came from out of the county. That doesn't mean we shouldn't RFP again and see, but it seems to be an expertise that we don't have right now. At least no one is proposing in county.
And if we went for this RFP to get this consultant to do scenario 1, we'd have to write up the RFP and we'd have to put it out. And my concern is, what would be the timeline on that? Would we be able to do that, in time for these immediate issues that we have, or do we need to be doing, the short-term things first?
Well, to fulfill the RFP for the direction the board gave, I feel like that's a new RFP that talks about delivering a project in all 5 districts, or at least not delivering it, but delivering a specific grant application and effort on 5. I think that's what the board said. The GEI contract, we could just amend to do something for, say, the governor's executive order, or we could RFP for a new one. As far as the time it would take, the staff that I would consult who'll be writing the RFP, you are looking at. So, I wrote the GEI RFP. I will end up writing this RFP with input using, frankly, quite a lot of what Supervisor McGorty prepared in the scenario 1 attachments, and adding what I feel the board has to do. But I would just start working on that and do it as quickly as I could. Usually you're 30 days out to get proposals, and then you're a few weeks selecting proposals. So, probably the most ambitious schedule was we would be getting the consultant on board in the last meeting in December. That would be ambitious. More likely it might be the first part of next year. But amending the GEI contract to just get some technical work with their remaining budget, I could process an amendment with the Board of Supervisors, publicly, and that would go much quicker. That would just be a contract amendment. That's why I brought that up in the past. It would just be someone to review hydrogeologist reports if we did have to approve a well, under the new order. So it would be quick.
Yeah. Just my concern, if I could just, one more question.
Sure.
Is just these short-term possibilities of funding and grant options and getting this information together. And it sounds like this consultant won't, in the best case scenario, won't be on until December or so. So how do we go about doing that?
So CEO Antle, we have relationships with both LACO and Larry Walker and Associates, don't we? So LACO's helped you through Office of Emergency Services for grant writing when you've needed them?
Correct. We have Laco and Associates currently on contract. I would have to look at their scope, and I don't know the status of Larry Walker. We may have used all that up in a prior, but we do have a relationship with them, and we have used them, but I don't know if we used all that up.
We have no active contracts with Larry Walker at this point.
So in kind of an emergency situation, if there was sort of a red hot need and funding became available, and I know that there's a lot of competition for all of the water grants coming from the water resource agencies, we could do a short contract, correct?
Yes, as the need comes up, CEO Antle, yes. As short needs come up, we can do individual contracts with specialists as needed. And again, LACO's been looking for those. Your grant division staff have been looking at those. And that OES team that you mentioned, we pulled that information together. The need that the districts were seeing was pulled together and been updated a couple of different times. Howard, I think that was about a year ago, maybe right after we declared the drought, maybe in April or May, that we started working on that list. And then I know through the various meetings that you all had across the districts that was updated. So to do another poll and to see where everybody's at and if there's additional projects out there, I think that's manageable because we still have this survey that we used last time.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah,
Supervisor
it
Hastert?
sounds like that's what we need to do, and just update what we have and make sure we have the information ready for whatever funding, might be out there.
So two points I wanted to bring up. One is that in our proposed format of creating this water resources team, we're relying on University of California Cooperative Extension, who is hiring an extension hydrologist who will be more than just looking at, obviously, potable water systems, and they certainly will have expertise in that, not only in, looking at municipal systems, but also individual systems. So this is something we haven't addressed very much as a water ad hoc, is how do we deal with the small water systems around the county, many of which are not doing well, and how do we build some capacity for dealing with springs and water storage and things like that? How do we connect people who have financial needs? What are our possibilities? This is something I think we're going to have to build out a little bit more, because our traditional approach of you get all the rain that you need in one season and you store your water, and by the time the next rainy season comes around you still have water left. That doesn't seem to be working so well these days. So it's potable water for everybody is something that's a really high issue for me, and while we certainly are going to focus initially on public systems, it's still in the back of my mind too that we need to be working on smaller systems as well, like individual systems, and that's in the job description for the University of California person. So as we try to put this together in kind of a cheapo way, the reason that I look at UC is because they have capacity to be able to give the administrative support that an individual would need, an individual consultant. I do like Howard's idea eventually of having somebody we bring through the ranks and kind of build capacity internally so that we have our own county person as well. They could work collaboratively. And in the past, the water agency has worked collaboratively with UC, so we can see a trail of studies that have been done, some of which I participated in. And that connection with people on campus is really, really important as we start to pursue, more research-oriented issues on our, for things like groundwater. So Sam Sandoval is one of the leading experts on not only groundwater, but also on a lot of surface water resources too, particularly the Eel River. He's done a lot of work there as well as the Russian. So having that connection to UC is a real bonus, and we have it anyway, but it just gets a little bit stronger. I've talked with the VP of Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources, which is the mothership of UC Cooperative Extension, and Glenda Humiston is very excited about seeing a kind of a new partnership with counties on this. She thinks that this is a way to look at the future for how UC can be more relevant and effective as we move into things like drought and fire, which they are investing quite a lot of resources into to address the needs on the ground in California. So I think this is our best option with a little bit of money, is trying to leverage the existing resources that we have internally. And then the other thing that's also critically important is CEO Antles really finally organizing the Office of Emergency Services, as well as a grant and contract team, which are the other part of the puzzle. Is that okay? So you've identified where the issues and needs are, so who do you go to then to make something happen? And it's really clear we can't get anywhere without money and without someone who can write grants and be effective at it. So it's very much a collaborative effort, and you know, if we can't afford the gold-plated agency, the next best thing we can do is have a lot of really well-motivated people to work with. And that's kind of been the way it's been in water in Mendocino County. We have a lot of very, very capable individual private citizens that have done amazing stuff over the years to keep water in our pipes and available for irrigation. The city of Ukiah is also an extraordinary resource to us, as well as Fort Bragg. So we see the municipal efforts have been really, really good. So I kind of blathered on long enough. Other than to say, I think we can do this. You know, we're faced with our choices of limited money and trying to find talent to help us keep our projects going. I want to repeat last year where I think the county did a good job of leveraging $75,000 to the tune of $22 million of grant income. Not that the county necessarily had fingers on every one of those things, but what we created was a community, and we made really good connections with the resource agencies and the people who are involved in the grant funding, and that's what we want to keep going. At least that's how my goal, sitting here as chair of this committee. John, anything you want to add?
Well, I think that you're right on with what you're saying, and we do need to play a role in the county water, you know, what's going on and what will be going on in the future. I guess when we go to GEI and the work they did, and they had the steering committee of, I don't know, 15 people or so, who were, you know, people who are, like you said, those citizens who've been volunteering or working in water for a long time. And so I think it'd be good to maybe, well, at least look at their recommendations or reconvene that group and see what their thoughts are on, you know, the best way to move forward and everything, and how to make this integration with, you know, UC cooperative extension work.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you 100%, and this is the framework to bring the people together. It's a little more formal than our ad hoc, but it's, you know, Councilor Curtis, how do you work with a large number of people that you see as key informants on a process and within the framework of an organization like this?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I may ask for a little bit of clarification there. You're asking in terms of process of working with a large number of people outside of the committee context, is that right?
Correct.
Or does it have to be outside? Can we invite that steering committee to our next meeting of this standing committee, you know, and just have a workshop or whatever?
If I may respond through the chair, yes. So I would essentially see two models. One would be to allow or to invite those people to come and to comment and either, you know, present or as public comment, be providing the information. The other would be to essentially assign staff to work with them to get the information and to come back. I don't know that there's a good way. I mean, the sort of the third option would be for each of you individually without talking to each other to meet with them, but that seems, it's probably not the most efficient way. That sounds like that would be duplicative for them. And it also, of course, raises the issue that they have to avoid telling you what each other said. So I think the most efficient route would probably be to have them, just invite them to the next standing committee meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I don't have a pin, but I will say everyone on that working committee was on the email list for this. The GEI's consultant, at the board's direction comprised that, said 2 meetings, 2 workshop, 2 working meetings. They're all working people. They're all really busy. They extracted that information. It's in the implementation plan that was presented to the board August 2nd. See, I've got my month right now. My thought was that, everybody's busy, that's part of the reason I either wanted to hire a water agency general manager or technical person, or now scenario one, we're going to get a consultant. I think that one of my scope of work tasks is for that consultant to reach out to that group. And the other thing, that group pretty much made their feelings clear. And I would say that GEI did a really good job in the appendice of capturing all their comments. So how many times do you need to ask them? At this point, I think that the only reason the consultant would reach out to various members of that group is if one of these 5 supervisorial district projects that are going to be identified in the contract as the priority that the consultant's going to help facilitate, if I understood the board's direction, they would obviously work with the various members from that group that are involved with that project. But I think that those folks, just like Council Curtis just said, they certainly will continue to be invited to this group. They could always speak on public comment, but I really think that we involve them on a project-by-project basis. That's my idea. And to have this consultant we're going to hire do that, because the consultant will have time. They'll be on the clock getting paid to do that, and they'll have time.
So the one thing that I hope we have that we've enjoyed with the ad hoc is kind of a continuous conversation as conditions change on the ground. It's really great to get an update from different parts of the county, and that's one of the things that we enjoyed in our ad hoc. We did it differently. It was scheduled at a different time of the day, which I think was more convenient for people being at 4 o'clock, which means their day was basically wrapped up, whereas having this on a Monday morning at 9, that's tough, because that's usually when most everyone's starting the week and trying to get everybody out into the field and doing their work or planning the week. So this isn't the ideal time for this, and I don't know how much flexibility we have on things like this. So Councilor Curtis, what can you share with us how these meetings are scheduled?
I might defer to clerk of the board in terms of how the calendar is set. I believe the board votes at the beginning of the year, but COB should be able to elucidate.
This is Atlas Pearson, Deputy Clerk of the Board. Yes, so we draft the master meeting calendar at the end of every year, for the following year. It's set up all at once. That way the dates are set at the beginning of the year. You know what dates the meetings are going to happen on, as well as that gives us the ability to schedule other things around them, especially with the reopening of chambers for affiliated agencies. We want to make sure that every date that we need the chambers is set ahead of time. That way we can, accommodate those others, as well as make sure we don't conflict with any board dates.
Is there anything sacred about having this meeting at 9 o'clock on a Monday?
Yes. So historically, we set up the standing committee meetings on Mondays. The issue here is that we have 2 standing committees, both now with active referrals. I know general government's not meeting today, but we do have to have time to accommodate both of those meetings. So one does have to happen from 9 to noon, and then at 1:30 to 4:30, we have the second one. And historically speaking, they have typically, and in the time I've been here, they've always fallen on those Mondays, which again does kind of fall back to the master meeting calendar and other agencies, and yeah.
Okay. John?
Well,
Just real quickly, in the throes of the drought last June, July, August, September, we were conducting a Friday morning 8:30. Talk about inconvenient time. Friday morning 8:30. Sometimes 40 people on the call, state, local, and all the agencies. That has dropped off. My last DOC meeting was basically county staff and state staff, and bless his heart, John Smith from Fort Bragg usually always tuned in. So I guess what I'm saying is maybe, I hate to say it, but the droughts maybe just become normalized, and we just don't have that group tuning in. But if we contacted them, we have their contact, and you can, I just wanted to say that the numbers have fallen off, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, this has become kind of normalized, and now we're probably not dealing with the anxiety that we were a year ago, and also we've solved some problems. So in the process of this, we've met some needs, and things are moving forward to address some of the concerns that people had. John?
Well, we do have 11 people on the Zoom meeting right now. So I guess my question is, going along with the set in stone, standing committee meetings, and I don't want to put too much on the clerk of the board's office, but, we do put on special meetings for the board of supervisors. So it seems like if there's a real need, at this point, I just think if we start meeting every 2 months for the water agency, that's like not going to solve too many problems quickly, right? I just hate to be set in every 2 months at this point, because we are in the heart of this drought right now.
So Atlas or County Council Curtis, what are our options then if we wanted to meet outside of this regularly appointed time?
So I will just address from a legal perspective, and I'll let clerk of the board sort of speak to the practical considerations. The standing committee does have the ability to go ahead and to call a special meeting in the same way their board would be able to. Again, that's 24 hours notice, same notice requirements that you would have for board, which means it's got to be received in writing with an agenda at least 24 hours in advance, has to be sent to any media agencies that have requested notice, et cetera. And then obviously it's got to be posted, has to be in a public location, all of those usual requirements as well. I think in this case, you're probably going to be more interested in addressing sort of the practical considerations. Some of the things that we do typically as part of these committees are not legal requirements, such as the live streaming and the recording, et cetera. On the other hand, those are also done, I think, particularly for bodies that have more public interest, and if the reason you want to meet more is because of public interest, that may mean you have more of a desire to be having those requirements. So I'd look to clerk of the board to be able to speak to the practical factors.
Oh, Howard?
And one other thing, we have not disbanded the Department Emergency Operations Center for the declared emergency we're still in. So we were meeting weekly, then bi-weekly. Now I'm meeting in the month that the task force doesn't meet, which means I'll meet on a Friday morning at 8:30 next month, and then the task force will meet in October, and I won't. And if I needed to increase those DOC meetings to every Friday, which is what we did for a while last year during the peak of this, I could always do that, and I'm not under those Brown Act requirements. And I might add the same mailing list, is invited to those, so we can communicate.
So go ahead, John, if you have a question.
Oh, so the public's invited to those meetings?
Well,
This is-
actually not. It's our group of stakeholders.
Okay.
Which are, I'll bet you if you looked at the 11 people on Zoom right now, they're probably on the stakeholder group list.
But Glenn and I couldn't attend those meetings.
And I guess the public could attend them too. It just wouldn't be a formal outreach. I'd have to think about that. The DOC is typically cooperators, stakeholders, state partners. That's who has attended those meetings.
Okay, well, we'll continue to investigate that. I could see us having especially as grant opportunities come along, and we know more or less what the calendar and the time frame of those are, it might be worth having a special meeting for everyone. So that's an option.
How about if, Howard, if you feel like you need some kind of decision made by the standing committee or input or something, then you could notify the chair, and And we could, if we needed to, we'd set up a special meeting. If we don't, then you go along with doing what you're doing.
Sure, if the DOC got some news, we could pass that along. I haven't looked at council, but I'm sure we could.
Well, great. So anything else, John, we need to cover right at the moment on this subject?
The subject of the meetings or the water agency?
The water agency is an agenda item to be.
Well, I guess that when we're looking at this RFP to get this consultant, and my understanding was that with the consultant before, last year when we were working with getting the water hauled to the coast, that there was quite a bit of county time involved. County staff, either your staff or executive office or the Office of Emergency Services, the grant team, all that. So I guess that it would be good to know what will be involved in the water agency. I think that's what the board wanted too, is to have the full picture of what the cost will be.
Sure, and the contract I'll have to bring to the board will have a scope, deliverable tasks, and to some extent, will define those in the RFP and then build those out of the proposal. So those will be public.
Okay, and then the CEO could provide like what additional support staff besides the UC Cooperative Extension will be needed to support the work.
Certainly,
Is
we can work with Howard and his team, and then the fiscal team and the grants team to see how we pull that together. Also, the impact on OES, because they join your calls as well. So we can put that picture together when Howard reports out on the RFP.
Sometimes, even in contracts I've done, it'll specify in the task that what's the county's responsibility. For instance, sometimes when I do a bridge, I have my right-of-way agent do the right-of-way, and then the consultant defines, this is our work, and the county will do this work, and we could do that in the contract we put together. We could define what Darcy's team is doing, what UC is agreed to do in the contract we bring the board, so that there would be contract tasks and deliverables, and then there would be county responsibilities defined.
Thank you.
CEO Antle, right now, how are you handling grant applications in terms of county expenses? Do you try to recover them for grant writing when it's possible, or what do you do?
Yes, absolutely, when it's possible. Sometimes the pre-work does not qualify for reimbursement. Usually once the grant starts, then we can get reimbursed. Some other grants allow us to recoup the work ahead of time, but there's very few of those. But yeah, it's in the disaster recovery, the PERM bucket is where we usually pay those expenses out, or in OES if it happens to be under the OES division.
Okay, and we still qualify as a drought emergency from the state?
Correct.
Okay. All right, well, that kind of wraps up my questions. Supervisor Hasjack, is there anything else you want to bring for the good of the order before we open it up for public comment?
Well, just to be clear that, Howard, you have what you need for the water agency, the long-term RFP and all that. And it sounds like for the short term, we have things in place and we can, update the information and all that we need to get. And so it sounds like we're in a good position right now.
I think so. So, Howard, anything for the good of the order?
I would just say a lot of it depends on a good proposal when we do the RFP. A lot of times I'll put out a proposal for a bridge. I'm sorry to keep using road and bridge examples because that's really what I know. But I know I want to get from this side of the river to the other side, and often I get a proposal that just blows my socks off on how to do that. So to some extent, I'm looking for whoever proposes on this, how to take this bucket of things we said we want and gives us a nice proposal to do that. And obviously that'll be translated into a contract the board and the public will get to look at.
Okay. Is there any public comment?
Yes, first on the line is Devin Bohr.
Good morning. Devin Bohr, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. Appreciate the continued conversation on this topic. As Mr. DeShiel said, I'm assuming folks on the line this morning were part of this conversation with the consultant. I guess I have a few questions in terms of sort of where this, ultimately could be going in terms of making a process productive. When we had the governor's order come out related to groundwater wells, one of the questions that came up from the get-go, sort of like Mr. DeShield mentioned, was there are a very limited number of certified hydrogeologists in the state. And there's already 2 firms currently working with the Ukiah Valley GSA. One is Larry Walker and the other is West Yost. So that's something to consider in terms of potential conflict. I don't know if there is or not, in terms of what work this entity might be asking a potential consultant to do in conflict with what they're already being sort of working with through the Ukiah Valley GSA, but just something to think about. And I guess, if that is, if GEI is going to be asked to use the remainder of that contract between 40 and 80,000, as I heard mentioned, that's not a lot of money. It is a chunk, but in terms of hydrogeology, that could be pretty extensive in terms of what those tasks are going to be asked for. So I guess I feel like I need some additional clarity in terms of sort of what the roles of these different entities are going to be. In terms of the consultant, I'm still not 100% clear on sort of what role you see potentially could play if they're sort of acting as, like they do in this sort of sense already with assistance on education and doing research. Is there going to be, who's going to be remaining the role of the standard sort of everyday water agency requirements related to, some of the quagga, zebra mussels, some of the issues with water rights and things up here on the east side of Ukiah, the USGS gauge and other things that are sort of the day-to-day responsibilities of the water agency. So I think, I'd appreciate at least just some more conversation. And I do like the idea of trying to figure out a way of incorporating some of the suggestions or bringing some of those folks that worked on this committee back in to work with you as you move forward with sort of going through the details of where this process may go. I mean, I think all of us, if there's going to be money expensed, we want to see it be productive and complementary to what's happening. And at this point in time, I'm just not sure personally, where this is going. So thank you.
I would like to address that real quickly. So essentially, it's not going to be a hard, fast end with our relationship with Department of Transportation, because there'll still be some things we need to do. And there will be kind of a transition to be sure that we're compliant with any requirements that the state has for stormwater pollution prevention and quagga mussel and everything else. I see the UC person as more or less a resource in terms of education and knowing things. They're not regulators. They will help probably with the grants, possibly the execution of grants when they can. So that's still a little bit to be determined. That's some of the homework we have to do to make that clear. Thank you.
Next on the line is Jim Shields.
Good morning, everybody. For the record, we actually have, I'm aware of 2 licensed hydrologists in the county currently. In fact, one works for LACO, and the other is Terry Barber. She lives over in Fort Bragg. She's also a licensed hydrologist. In fact, she sent me a CV and resume not too long ago. But anyway, for the past year, the county's been discussing the issue of resurrecting or reestablishing a functioning water agency that will better serve and represent multiple water interests on a county-wide basis. But one of the major impediments to meeting that goal is what county officials don't know about basic water-related information and data far exceeds what they do know. It's going to be extremely difficult this time to move forward with structural, organizational, financial plans for this water agency when so little is known about these kind of rudimentary, but very important, essential water-related information and data. And it's a fact the county doesn't own a single water right to a single drop of water. The county doesn't produce a single drop of either potable or untreated water. Water production is overseen and managed by local government, public utility professionals who are the true experts in water-related matters. They're the most valuable resource the county has available to rely and depend on at this time for their expertise, professional insights into water-related matters. And one of the recommendations I'm making is that we need to get started on this right away. And what we need to do is send out a letter to all of the water agencies in the county, requesting that they get this information to us. I'm not going to waste your time by going through this treasure trove of information, but believe me, it's formidable and legion in numbers. And the second thing that needs to be done is another request needs to go out to water districts and municipal water departments, provide a prioritized list of at least, I'd recommend maybe 3 capital and operational projects. And the prioritized project list, I believe, should be reviewed and ranked by a 5-member technical advisory committee, with each member appointed by respective district supervisor. And the TAC would then forward its recommendations to the Board of Supervisors for final approval. You probably don't need a consultant dealing with that particular issue on any type of full-time basis, but I believe it's something we need to get started and get started as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I agree with you 100%.
Next on the line?
Oh, can I just comment too? So, those recommendations, I've talked to Jim Shields several times about those kind of ideas, and it seems like if Glenn and I are both in agreement, is what would we need to do to move on? It sounds like we have the capacity to move on a lot of that. We've got some of the information that needs to be updated, and then, kind of collating it and having this technical advisory committee deciding which ones go forward or whatever. Is that something that, in your opinion, Howard, we should be doing?
Again, Howard DeShield, Director of Transportation. My hope was to get the consultant on board, and then obviously we could have a task there to say the consultant shall convene a advisory committee or develop an advisory committee, a 5-member. You could even say, if that's what the board wants or decides to go along with it, the board would appoint, each board member would appoint one of the 5. We can make that part of their scope. The way I'm approaching this is to try to get somebody on board as soon as I can who's got the time to do all this, because if you wait for Howard to do it, it'll take longer than even January. So was the requirement to have the 5 people appointed by the board and then they select the consultant, or was the idea to have the consultant convene this team at whatever manner the board approves in the scope of work for the contract, and then have those 5 people vet the projects, the 5 projects from the 5 districts? I guess that's my confusion.
If we went ahead with this, I think it would be, we would get our consultant on board first, because you're right, there is management here, so there will take some time to convene the meetings, make conclusions, and then look at matching with the water resource agencies what funding might be available.
But all the data that we're looking for could be collected in the meantime.
Yeah, well, frankly, that data was put together in the spreadsheet last year. Really, it was pulled together by CEO Antle's team, and it was contributions from all those people on the line right now and many others who just put their projects forward. And they, I think that would be easy enough. The last speaker said, send a letter to all the agencies. We certainly have all the agencies on an email list, and we could ask for any updates. We could even include the spreadsheet and say, here's a spreadsheet from last year. Do you have any updates? I know some of those projects were funded through the grant cycle last year, so I guess they would come off the list because they're funded.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that would be easy to do. That
It
would be easy to do.
Yeah, I think that would be the way to go. Get the latest, greatest, right?
Yep, and I just recently opened that spreadsheet to take a look at it, and probably a third of them were funded, so it's time to update it. Are there any more public comment?
Yes. Next on the line is Deborah Edelman.
Hi, it's Deborah Edelman. I'm the Water Program Manager at the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District. First of all, I just want to say thank you for undertaking this process. It's obviously very important, and so I appreciate your efforts. I just want to mention something, Devin sort of alluded to it, which is that once the water agency is up and running, it's going to be addressing things beyond just getting water into taps, including stormwater management, including invasive aquatic species like the quagga zebra mussels, and as Supervisor McGorty mentioned, eventually almost certainly flooding. So the scope of work is more than just the current emergency of drought and getting water to people and farms. So I just wanted to mention that. And one thing that was not reflected in the GEI implementation plan is that much of the boots on the ground work that's being done by the water agency in those areas, such as the quagga zebra mussel monitoring, is currently being done by the Resource Conservation District in a contract with the water agency. So that it is part of a bigger picture beyond some of the like I said, the more immediate issue of getting water to taps. And I guess the last thing I just wanted to say is just put in a plug for, I know that it sounds like there might be some administrative hurdles to this, but having meetings that are more available to the public, as was mentioned previously, the Drought Task Force meetings were, I believe, on a Thursday at 4 o'clock, which is a really much better time for most people. And I think my reading of SB 552 is that that is a core part of the process. So I think that's really important. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Deborah. You know, the other thing that's important too is water conservation and water quality and watershed management, which is something that historically has been part of the water agency's mission. So we have to keep that in mind as well. Comments, John? Okay.
Last on the line, we have Elizabeth Salomon.
Morning, everyone. So first of all, I applaud you for meeting and making this meeting somewhat available to the public. I attend tons of Zoom meetings. I'm a professional administrator, and I found it very difficult to find the Zoom link for this. It took some texting of other water leaders in the area to figure this out. So I'm with the previous speakers, especially Deborah. This is not a great time. It's not easily accessible, even for those of us who are water professionals and are really trying to help out and participate. So as most of you know, I'm the general manager of the Mendocino County Russian River Flood Control and Water Conservation Improvement District. I was on the steering committee along with several of the folks that were speaking today. Thank you, Howard, for mentioning that we're all busy, and we did say what we wanted to say. However, interesting timing. A couple of us were talking last week about reconvening on a sort of voluntary basis with one of the supervisors in order to provide some more support and help in your task here. So as Glenn has mentioned many times, there's a core group of water professionals and leaders in Mendocino County. We tend to be in the same meetings together over and over and over. We work really well together. And we are very invested in Mendocino County water resiliency. I would say, please tap into that resource. Bring us together again. We don't need a consultant. We're all very familiar with having, meetings and how to facilitate ourselves. Do it here if you want in this public forum so both supervisors can be here, whatever, but do it soon. Hear from us. Let us help you, and let's create something that works for everyone so we're not duplicating what some other agency is already doing. So we have a full understanding, like Deborah went into some of the other aspects of what the county does in the water field. And both Jim and Devin had excellent points as well. So please use us as a resource so that we're not all moving in different directions. We need to be a unified voice and support one another with the minimal resources that we have. When we speak together, when we act together, we will then have better attention from the policymakers, the funders, the regulators, and we will be more beneficial for our entire community. Thank you.
So I agree with you 100% on that, Beth, and we have to leverage the limited resources that we have, and we're fortunate to have a really good group of professionals working on this on their own. The county's principal contribution, I think, is in the area of technical assistance and grant writing for the smaller groups especially. I probably can't help the city of Ukiah much. Russian River Flood Control knows pretty much how to deliver water, but there's other smaller agencies that don't. The 12 hookup water company in Manchester might need a little help occasionally, which I think the county can assist in. And also, politics and policy or something that the state listens to local governments, and that's really what I see us having to do as part of our task for moving improvements of our water resiliency forward.
That concludes public comments on this item.
Okay, so any closing comments from Supervisor Hasjack?
Yeah, there's a couple. That, what Elizabeth said about reconvening that group. I really think that that's a good idea, that we should have those people talking about what this next phase of the water agency will be. And those are the people who are the practitioners who really will be most affected by it. And so I think it would be good. And I don't think that this time is a good time, 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. So I think that, our purpose as government is to serve the people. And if we can do it at a better, convenient time for them, then that would be, it would be better for all of us because we'd get the information we needed. And so, I would like to see the standing committee have a meeting like in mid-September on a Thursday afternoon again, a special meeting to reconvene those people and, get that information. And so that's my one point. The other point is, I guess I'm looking at the big picture of, okay, we're doing this option one, and we do the consultant, and the consultant is like 7 months or whatever, 58% of the year. And then what do we do after that? So if we're standing up a water agency, is the idea to have this consultant there every year for 7 months, or do we do 1 year with the consultant and then we phase into this other long-term water agency using the other options or hiring a hydrologist or whatever? I'm just trying to figure out, and maybe that's what the steering committee could, in my mind, help us kind of come up with a plan. But I guess Supervisor McGorty, do you have a kind of a vision for how this is going to play out?
Sure. So, we have basically the equivalent of 7 months of a full-time person, but that doesn't mean they have to work full-time for 7 months. It means that we've got an allocation of funding, just as we did with our consultant, that we can draw from to help us through the process. So that it could be that they'll be very busy September through December, and then things really, taper off. But the idea is to try to use that funding over probably a 12-month period as we plan, working with our stakeholders to figure out what do we want to do long-term. So that's how I kind of see it. And ideally, we would have somebody permanently. Ideally, we would have someone who is sort of the knowledgeable water person on county staff, so that they can assist the different agencies and help, prepare the supervisors, keep us aware politically of what's going on, and make connections with the water resource agencies. Because that's one thing I learned from our first effort at this, is that those personal connections are critical to being able to make things happen. And that's what we're trying to build capacity for, is to be kind of in the game and not 42 different entities pursuing county or state funds with no coordination. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
So after this initial year, then would we be going back to redoing the consultant's contract, or would we be going for more established homegrown kind of staffing?
Ideally, it'd be having homegrown staffing, but the thing about consultants is that it's actually cheaper to have a consultant helping us with this than to actually hire somebody at this point, because to get a full-blown engineer to also take on, the leadership to put together a water program with salary and benefits is probably about $300K would be my guess. And this is a least expensive option to get us started by having somebody knowledgeable to help us work through this. That's what I think. Do you approve or disapprove? Do you have an opinion?
Well, I just want to see the consultant do that kind of high-powered work, that we looked at some of the tasks, and I think that we have the capacity within our staff already to do some of those tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we do hire this consultant, I want to make sure that we're getting our money's worth, and that they're doing that high level, connections with Sacramento or whatever we need to do, that would take some experience to do. And in the meantime, I would like to see that transition happen to homegrown, and whether it's a hydrologist or an analyst or a GM, someone who can kind of step in the long term, be the face of Mendocino County.
Well, that's my goal too, and I'm trying to work with the resources we have and come up with an effective plan and leverage what we have with our staff. We do have people in multiple departments doing little bits and pieces, so the idea is to coordinate all that together and wrap it up into one package and put a bow on it, so that we have something we're proud of.
Yeah, okay.
Howard.
Yeah, my comment on that was I did intend for the scope of work that I asked the consultant to prepare a proposal on, because the board already acted. Scenario one is to form the team, the water resources team that was clearly laid out. And therefore, what you describe will exist over multiple departments and multiple people wearing parts of a hat. That was what the board voted for. So we really don't have, in scenario one that I can see, that key person. I guess technically, because that's how Carmel Angelo set it up, that your general manager will remain the CEO, so that will become the central point with people. And she pointed at me, so if you really want that to happen, we're going to have to go to the board with a resolution and appoint Howard. But, that's the way it stands right now from what I can read in the history of it. The general manager mantle was passed to the CEO. But nevertheless, the team, which is what the board voted for, the what'd you call it, Supervisor McGordy?
Water resource team.
Yeah, the water resource team. We'll have, the functions spread over multiple people. And that's what the board said to do. So at the end of this consultant's term, the county will be left with not a standalone water agency, but a team. That's how I read scenario one.
Yeah, and it's patterned after how the Office of Emergency Services operates, and they're spread out over multiple departments, and it seems to function well. And I think, especially under the guidance of CEO Antle, she's tightening it up to make it even more effective.
Well, I think at some point, what I'm hearing Mr. DeShield saying is that we're going to have to transition from having this consultant with the team to someone who's kind of in charge besides Howard and the team.
Yeah, I think that would be ideal. And it'll take us a little while to build capacity, but, you know, you don't get anywhere unless you set goals and unless you start, you know, and I feel like for the last 10 years we've been in kind of a holding pattern. We at least had some presence, but now we're ready to move forward again because we have to. You know, this is a very existential threat. When you don't have water, that's a real problem, and not much can happen. We already have communities that can't add to their housing because they have no defined water supply. So we're here to give some institutional support so those kinds of things can get fixed. And as far as the head of the agency, who's better with a wrench, Howard or CEO Antle?
Or John Harper, if you're going to mostly be at UCC with their support staff. I mean, I'll say this, and it's true. When we were given this assignment, we were meeting state mandates, which we can continue to do. But to have a visionary, you know, full-time, you know, New Horizons water person, it's probably not me. It's just not my cup of tea. I don't know who it is in our organization, but it's probably not me.
Yeah, well, the good news is that I think there's a lot of people in the community who can add to that vision, and they're already thinking about it a lot. So I don't think that the task is going to land in your lap, Howard.
I'll take whatever task. Is how good a job you'll get. Mm-hmm. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't want to rehash what the board already voted on. You know, the idea of growing a person to be kind of a water emphasis, you know, at least for this year, is not on the table. We're going with scenario one. But I would ask the consultant to be looking at the staff, at the extension, and maybe they'd find somebody that the county could pay for enough of their wages to have them wear a hat part-time. But, you know, that maybe there's someone in our organization that will be able to pick that mantle up. In the meantime, whatever I'm asked to do, I'll do the best I can at, which is what I've been doing.
And we appreciate that. Supervisor Hasjack, anything else for the good of the order?
Well, I hate to bring this up again, but do we want to have a special meeting in September?
I'm very supportive of the special meetings, and if we can figure out how to do that so that we're compliant with the Brown Act and everything else and the functions of this group, I think that's a great idea. So.
Darcy Antle, CEO. Yes, I want to work with staff to make sure, because this is changing the time does add a burden to the staff. And at 4 o'clock on a Thursday, we have to look at hours because likely, even at this point, we're looking at an hour and a half. It could cause, overtime and other things. So as you can see, this is much different setting than doing the task force that you had prior. So we really need to take into consideration what County Council Curtis mentioned to make sure we're meeting the Brown Act, but meeting it versus exceeding it to see what that can look like for us. So we would like a couple of weeks to work through that, if that's okay with you all.
That's fine with me. So I think we can direct staff to work with us to come up with a plan to be able to meet the public at a more convenient hour to continue this conversation. Okay, with that, unless there's any further business?
Nope, thank you very much.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so we still have agenda item 3A, public expression. Is there any further public expression?
First on the line is Jeff Smith.
Yes, I'm Jeff Smith with the California Department of Water Resources. I want to apologize. I may have missed my window. I wanted to come and just share with you a couple of brief updates. When Howard sent an email out to me, I reached out to folks in our with our financial assistance branch. I know they did a presentation a couple months ago for you. I wanted to know a couple of updates for the grants that we have in the department. So I just wanted to share those briefly. I know you guys were talking about those early on. This week, or they're expecting this week, for our urban multi-benefit program, that draft guidelines and proposal solicitation packets are going to be available for public comment. They're expecting it. She was hoping today, but she had hesitation. So I would watch for those sometime this week. This year, there was no urban multi-benefit funds, so it's strictly urban, but it would be about 300 million will be available for urban grants. And they'll be taking applications for that program this fall. And then the other update I wanted to share was with the Small Communities Drought Relief Program. And I know you guys have had some projects with that. That program is beginning to, they're purchasing tanks so that they will be ready to deploy to small communities when residential wells go dry. So, and they are also putting, our public affairs office is putting together an informational flyer that will be sent out to the county specifically, hopefully soon. I didn't get an exact date on that, but I can deal with Howard if you want to reach out. I have the contacts to the folks in those programs if you would like more information on that. And that was for our Small Communities Drought program. Currently, that's all I wanted to share with you. I apologize if I missed my topic window on that, but I didn't want to go without letting you guys know that those are things coming up. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jeff. The communications with you is absolutely critical. So in the case of the Urban Grants Program, what's the grant cycle for that? When will it start? When are applications likely to be due?
I don't have an exact date on that. Like I said, they're opening it for public comment hopefully this week, and they expect to start making those available in the fall. So, September, October, maybe. I don't have an exact date on that.
Okay, and the same thing with those the Small Community Drought Relief Program.
Yeah, that as far as the tanks go, that was the first I've heard of that, to be honest. But I think that's a great step they're taking in preparation. Those are the same programs that you can reach out, or I can give you the information on that, and they can give you more details. Like I said, they'll be putting out a flyer with details about the tank program. And I don't know if you were the urban multi-benefit, or I'm sorry, the small communities was specifically targeting communities that are not served by an urban water supplier, and they're less than 3,000 customers or 3,000 acre feet. So I'm not sure, hopefully that, or I can pass on, a direct contact with them if you'd like.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much, and we'll be talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Jeff's team is always at the DOC meetings. I'll definitely have one the third Friday next month. And by then, it sounds like a lot of these will be out. So that's the kind of just sort of communication that happens at those meetings. They throw that stuff out. They pass things along.
Good.
That concludes public expression.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I think we can end our meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.